just going to jump right in. Youth suicide statistics report from 2018 states that an average of over 3,069 students, grades 9 through 12, attempt to take their life each day. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about mental health and its interaction with the education system, and at large I'm going to be discussing and assessing whether or not schools are doing enough to adequately treat mental illness in students. As someone who has had friends, both boys and girls, who struggle with this, it's a topic I'm extremely passionate about, and it's ultimately why I chose to do this topic for this project. So the main points that I want to touch on are analyzing the historical and current impact of schools' treatment of mental illnesses, and ultimately I hope through the use of some statistics you'll come to the same conclusion that I did, that historically schools have failed their students. Second, I'm going to touch on some programs and strategies that schools are trying to utilize to improve the mental health of its students. And then finally, I'm going to kind of explain to you guys why I think it's not enough what schools are doing, that more has to be done. So first and foremost, I just want to kind of define a couple terms that may be a little broad and vague. The first term is mental illness. Those are also known as mental health disorders. That's really just any condition that affects mood, thinking, and behavior. So that includes, but it isn't limited to, ADHD, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, to name a few. And then systems of support. That's really any program that promotes intervention or promotes the mental well-being of students. So you might ask yourself, how does this topic necessarily relate to education? And I want to explain to you why this matters. Neil Humphrey, in a 2012 journal entry, states that mental illness in the public education system has become what constitutes as a crisis. And he says that's not only in K through 12 students, but also in higher education, so undergraduate students and graduate and professional students. And ultimately, it hinders education. So obviously, if you have something that's a hindrance to education, we want to try and do as much as we can to make that better, so that every student can learn to the fullest of their potential. Beth Handler, in a 2011 report, notes that the United States' treatment of mental illness has gone as far back as the 1910s, which may sound really impressive, but unfortunately that initial campaign was an ultimate failure, known as the mental hygiene movement. It tried to get students to conform to the popular thoughts about how high-achieving students should perform, rather than trying to treat individual students or promote a supportive school system in a way that would help and work to improve the mental health of students in the school. A Cal MHSA study from 2013 states that 19% of students on campuses at the University of California, California State University, and California Community College campuses meet the qualifications for having probable psychological distress. Furthermore, 33% to 39% claim that their mental illness is a hindrance to their academic performance. And then you also have a large number of students on these campuses reporting that they do not seek the services that their schools provide, either because of embarrassment, of cost, of embarrassment, of cost, not knowing how to access or not knowing what like services were provided. So obviously that's like really problematic, because if students can't feel comfortable talking about mental illness, then like obviously that's going to be really problematic to their learning, and it's going to only prohibit how much they can learn. The Phi Delta Kappan also notes that 10 million students need professional help, grades K through 12. So those are kind of some statistics that show you just how much of a problem mental illness really is, and just how serious and wide in scope that problem is. But that leads me to my next point: what exactly are schools doing? Thankfully, schools are trying to implement new systems. There has been recommendations for federal, state, and local governments, as well as the White House and federal agencies, to get involved to try and promote mental well-being in students. And the Phi Delta Kappan also has this 3-tier system, the first tier of which is focused on a holistic view, the second set more of a targeted intervention, and the third is more individual, so focusing on like counseling and therapy for individual students. But ultimately, schools aren't doing enough, in my opinion. I told you about the stats like the Phi Delta Kappan and the Cal MHSA study, but a perfect example of this is the Andrew versus Douglas County School District court case, in which a student in public school wasn't receiving adequate mental health treatment, and it was a hindrance to his academics. He wasn't progressing. His parents took him out and put him in a private school where he excelled, and when they tried to reintegrate him back into the public school system for financial reasons, they continued to neglect his mental well-being, and so they ended up suing and winning in the Supreme Court. But basically, in conclusion, I think that it's really important that we notice that schools historically have failed their students. It is a good thing that schools are starting to really try and treat mental illness, but there's still a lot to be done. I want to thank you all for listening to me, and hopefully we can, as potential educators in the future, we can work to make sure that statistic of 3,069 students who try and take their life each day only gets lower and lower.